To you tonight about the drones. That's the topic of our conversation, and what they do and what they are and why we think they're wrong and what we can do to try to stop them. So I'm going to give you just a few facts about drones so we all really understand kind of what they are and have just a base knowledge of that. Drones are also called unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, and so when you look at them in the media that you can see drones, you can see them referred to as UAVs, basically an aircraft without a person aboard, controlled by remote control on the ground. So there's a pilot that sits at a computer looking at a computer screen and has a joystick. And the drones can be as small as a hummingbird. They've got them 4 inches, so they can be doing surveillance and people won't even notice that they're there. Or they can be up to 44 feet long and weighing 16,000 pounds. Some of the bigger ones cost $15 million and more, and millions more to operate, so they aren't cheap. And one of the unique things about them that makes them really different than an airplane, besides that they don't have a person aboard, is that they can fly continuously for days. So they spend days just hovering over different areas and with their cameras and doing surveillance of people. And of course, our concern is the military concern. They're used for a lot of other, for some other purposes, but we're really concerned about what they're doing in the military with them, both for surveillance, and then they also carry missiles for attacking civilians or terrorists or whatever they think they're attacking. But they're being used by the CIA and by the U.S. Air Force. The president says that we use them to kill the terrorists and to make the world a safer place. And he also says, you know, the government tries to tell us they're a really good thing because our pilots don't have to directly go into combat and put their lives at risk. But in reality, the drones are being used to expand the U.S. empire, like so many things in our government. And we're just kind of acting as a bully, going around the world, thinking that we can, you know, do what we want to do with the lives of other people around the world. And they're not just killing terrorists, they're killing a lot of innocent people. And expanding the powers of the president, and this is something that we should be really concerned about, the way the powers of the president are expanding, and many of you maybe have seen in the news in the past few days, the report that was by NBC News that kind of gives the legal justification for killing people, that the president really has the, they're saying the president has the power to say, this American's going to die. And you know, whether he can do it in the United States isn't clear yet, but you know, it's something we have to be watching and be really concerned about. And we'll talk more about these issues later. Drones are also really, really big money, and that's one of the reasons, you know, that they're in existence. They're providing a lot of big U.S. corporations with revenue. They're building drones, and the U.S. and Israel are the 2 countries that are doing the most, the highest levels of manufacturing of drones. But there's a lot of other countries now that are developing the technology to do it. China's currently manufacturing drones, and they're selling them to developing countries like Pakistan. So, you know, our drones that were flying over Pakistan, now Pakistan is going to have drones, and how is this all going to make the world a safer place? There was a study in September of 2012 that said 76 countries now have drones, and so, you know, that number continues to grow. So the manufacturers of drones are making big money, and they're buying up Congress really to increase their profits. There's a industry trade group called the Association for Unmanned Vehicle Systems International, and they paid $280,000 in 1 year to lobby Congress. Congress people are also getting hundreds of thousands of dollars through PACs from drone companies, and so you know, just like you were talking about earlier, I mean, this is a really big problem, and the money in it makes it a bigger problem. Drones are also big money for private contracting companies. There's about 200 to 300 people that are needed to keep a drone operational. And that contrasts with about 100, or less than 100 people for an F-16 fighter jet. So 200 to 300 people to keep this one vehicle operational in the air, that's a lot of people. And you know, there's not as many people these days who are joining the military. So we have to hire private contractors to be part of all of this. So right now there's kind of a growing concern that that many of the functions that are currently conducted by private contractors should really only be done by military personnel, by government personnel. There was an example in 2010 where a U.S. drone strike accidentally killed 15 people in Afghanistan, and they found out that it was a private contractor that analyzed the data that led to the attack. And so some people think that they shouldn't be, you know, having that kind of control over what goes on. So where does all of this bring us today? The Bureau of Investigative Journalism is an organization in Great Britain, and they do a really great job of tracking what's going on in the U.S. war on terror and on the drone wars. And they go over to Pakistan and Afghanistan and those countries where we're conducting drone warfare, and talk to people over there and try to really get a feel for how many people are dying and how many attacks are being made and so on. And they said that it went in the first 9 days of 2013, there were already 6 drone attacks. So that was more than even in any month in 2012. And so there's a lot of concern that these drone attacks are going to be intensifying over the next few years. And you know, we just have to ask ourselves, how safe is that really making us? And we'll be talking more about some of the issues involved in that as we go on tonight.
I'll stand up so hopefully you can hear me. In a former life, I was also an attorney. And so, of course, I'm very interested in the whole legal issues involving drones. And it is interesting because we have international law. We have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And Article 3 says, everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. So if you are being blown to bits by a drone from the sky in a country we're not at war with, that hardly meets the requirements of human rights law. There's also the Charter of the United Nations. And you know, remember, this was started after the Second World War. And the whole purpose of the United Nations was to try to prevent future wars. And so the Charter said that you could not go to war, no country would go to war unless they were under imminent attack, and therefore had a right to self-defense. But if a country claims that right, they are to immediately report to the Security Council of the United Nations. Now, we are saying, in effect, what is an anticipatory defense. You know, we're saying that people, terrorists, or militants, or whatever combatants, whatever we decide to call them, that we can kill them because in the future they're going to attack us. And the numbers I've seen is that about 1 militant is attacked or killed and then there's 1 out of 7 is a militant and the rest are civilians. So really there is a lot of whatever you want to call it. The government calls it collateral damage. So that is a real issue. And we're using them. I mean, you could probably make a legal case that we could use them in Iraq and Afghanistan because we were at war. And, you know, and we have militaries that are fighting each other. But we are using these drones in Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, Mali, Libya. And there was just a thing this morning, it was called the Black Agenda Report, that we have fleets of drones descending on Africa. Niger has agreed to have a base. Ethiopia has one already. Burkina Burkina Faso has had one since 2006 that they say are terrorizing Somalis. The UN peacekeeping forces in the Democratic Republic of the Congo are wanting to have the use of US drones. And we now have an Africa Command in Djibouti, I believe it's pronounced. And we are already sending drones out from there. So basically, every country in Africa can be reached by drones. And we are expanding it greatly because of Al-Qaeda. So I think there's a real issue about international law and human rights law. But we also, our military law, there really are laws of war. And one of the things there is that there have to be 4 principles taken into account. Military necessity, distinction between combatants and non-combatants, proportionality, in other words, you're not justified to kill a whole batch of people, just because there's one person you want to get, and the whole issue of humanity. And I don't see how you can say that drones meet any of those requirements. Because if there's a plane in the sky and you've got a pilot 6,000 miles away, where is the military necessity and the imminent harm? So it really is, I think, a very dangerous thing. We also have, interestingly, I didn't know about this until I was doing some research on, we also have in this country executive orders that both President Ford and President Reagan put into place. They define assassination as murder by sudden or secret attack for political reasons. And we were doing that quite a bit against Castro and against various other people we didn't like, Lumumba in the Congo. But it's very clear. It says no employee of the U.S. government shall engage in or conspire to engage in political assassination. And Reagan said, he even expanded it, that nobody employed or acting in the behalf of the U.S. should engage in assassination, and no agency of the intelligence community shall participate in or request any person to undertake activities forbidden by this order. So our own law says we're not to do this because they are political assassinations. I mean, maybe not necessarily of a leader, but we have been targeting, the high-level folks in Al-Qaeda. So it's really, I think, a very clear violation of international and national law. And yet, the Obama administration actually has been engaging in way more drone warfare than under the Bush administration, which is where this first started. And as Joy said, there's a lot of money involved. And the Air Force, for example, is talking about recruiting more pilots for drones than for manned airplanes. And it's estimated that this is at least a $90 billion business. And that's the stake that the companies, the defense contractors, have in this. So I mean, I think that this is clearly illegal, and we ought not to be doing it if we believe in the rule of law.
So besides the illegal issues around drone warfare, there's also a really high human cost that to me is a really important part of the whole story. And there's actually a cost to the U.S. soldiers who are involved in it, not as high as what's, the people on the ground who are getting bombed, but, for the U.S. soldiers who are involved in it, they sit at a computer and they have a screen in front of them and their joystick, and they're controlling this drone that's half a world away. And this drone has a good camera on it that can see what's going on the ground. And they may be spending days watching this drone, circle over this hut in Afghanistan. And there's children in the yard playing maybe, there's a wife going out to the market, there's visitors coming and going, and maybe they make a decision, someone who's studying the intelligence makes a decision that, well, this is a terrorist group here, And so eventually they give the order to attack, and the person sitting at who's been watching this family for days drops the missile on the house. And then the drone stays over the house, and they can see the body parts, and they can see the chaos and people running around and screaming. And so all this information comes into them after they've watched this family for days. And, so they're finding that there's very high rates of post-traumatic stress disorder for the soldiers who are doing this job, as high as the soldiers who are in combat, because then they go home to their families at night or whenever they're off duty. And, you can imagine the cognitive dissonance that, trying to go into this happy little family home of theirs when they've just destroyed a family half a world away. So that's one issue for the human cost. Another thing that I think, from my perspective, is the human cost, is that for all the people in this country, just all the people in general, we are so far removed from what's going on over there, and even more so because now we don't have our men and women in combat on the ground there, putting their lives in danger. And so to remove us from the tragedy, from the consequences of all of this, is a real cost to our humanity, I believe. And so that's another issue that we have to be aware of. There was, Obama claims that drones just do precision strikes and only take out the bad guys, the terrorists. But, there's been reports from a new report out from Stanford Law School and New York University Law School that says this isn't true. Amnesty International has reports on this, Human Rights Watch, just a lot of different groups that tell us that they aren't only terrorists dying over there. It's a lot of innocent people dying over there. But still, the drone warfare is steadily increasing. There was a report published by the Campaign for Innocent Victims in Conflict that says that these drone strikes are made based on faulty evidence and that many innocent civilians are being killed. So what really compels me to get involved in this work is this human cost, is the suffering and dying of people half a world away, that I think of as my brothers and sisters, that this world is becoming so much smaller, and we are all connected all around the world, but we're killing these people. And they're suffering and they're grieving for the loss of their sons and daughters and their mothers and fathers. And so, one of the ways that Obama can say that these are precision strikes is because he counts as an enemy combatant any military age man between the ages of 18 and 65. And so, he can have that criteria. Well, that includes every single man in Afghanistan or Pakistan. So that's really kind of crazy. So Obama has a kill list, and every week he looks at the kill list, and he decides who's going to live and who's going to die. And sometimes it's the people in Afghanistan or Pakistan or Yemen or Somalia or other countries in the world that we're going to. But it's one person without judge, jury, anything. That it's just, that is not in our Constitution that we can do that. They also conduct signature strikes, and what those are is they see someone doing suspicious-looking activities. So maybe there's a young Muslim man, and he has a minivan, and he drives to several houses, and he picks up a bunch of people, and they're following him, and they say, yeah, well, that's usually, when they're having a meeting to plan some terrorist activities. So I think this looks suspicious. I think we got to take him out. And they, so they don't really know who this person is, but they're doing something that looks suspicious. It's hard to know how many people are really being killed in these attacks because our government is not telling us. But like I said, there's groups like the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, and they say that between 2,500 and 3,200 people have been killed in drone attacks in Pakistan alone, and 176 of these are children. You know, they're 1-year-old, 2-year-olds, and 3-year-olds that are being killed by these drone attacks. In a lot of cases, they'll take out a whole family, you know, the brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers, maybe leaving a few survivors to you know, how do you get on with your life after something like that? I think that our president became a war criminal in his second day in office when he launched his first drone attack. And I think because we pay taxes, because we are, you know, this is our government, I think we all have blood on our hands, and we really have to figure out what we can do to try to stop this. They also do strikes on first responders to drone attacks. So as the drone continues to circle over the head after an attack, you know, people come to try to help the people who have been attacked, and they drop a second bomb on them. They also drop bombs on people who are in the funeral processions of victims of drone attacks. So, you know, life there has just changed so much. And it's not like the bombs don't just kind of, like with the old airplanes in days past, they would fly in, they would drop their bomb, and they would fly away. But these drones are circling overhead for days and weeks sometimes, and it's just really affecting the people of these countries. And there's an area in Pakistan specifically, Waziristan, a province there, where they've got a lot of drones flying overhead. This study that I referred to earlier by Stanford and New York University Law School, they say that this is just terrorizing a whole civilian population and causing post-traumatic stress disorder to a whole population of people. Leah Bolger is a former president, national president of Vets for Peace, and she went to Pakistan and to visit some of the hardest hit areas there in Waziristan. And here's what she said after she was there. Imagine having up to 6 drones circling overhead 24 hours a day, making an incessant, constant buzzing sound that never ceases. The sound the drone makes creates a deep-seated psychological fear, a sort of emotional torture. The lives of these people have changed completely, their culture and way of life destroyed. So the people who are being killed there have not been charged, tried, or convicted of any crime. They're being summarily murdered by our government. And you know, I think that we need to stop this. We need to demand that our government stop this.